Okay, so in our last set of videos, we discussed the scientific process as it relates to economics and learning about the world, studying economic questions so that we may understand what is creating problems of scarcity. And if we can understand those problems, we can better understand what sort of solutions would solve those problems and how we can improve the world around us. So before we dive more into the nuts and bolts about what is required of a model in economics, I'd like to point out that obviously I am wearing different clothing than in the previous video, so you can guess that this is recorded on a separate day. So remember that you are free to watch these videos any point in time over the next week, so long as you are able to best answer the quiz questions related to these videos, which demonstrate your comprehension of the material that's covered. Also, over the course of the next 10 weeks, you're going to notice my beard coming in a little bit thicker, so you can think of me as your virtual chia pet. Just you don't have to water me, which will work just fine. So also in this video, I would like to discuss the details about what sort of assumptions economists make about how individuals and their models behave and think. And specifically, I want to tie this to the concept of thinking like an economist. And because economists assume certain behavior about the individuals and their models, they're also making a recommendation for how we should behave and make efficient decisions as individuals. So there are really two primary lessons I want you to take away from this video, which we will discuss on the next page. So these two concepts that I really want you to take away from this video are how to think like an economist and how that's related to the modeling process. In terms of what I want you to take away from this video as it relates to the class itself, I want you to better understand how the models that we're going to learn in this class are built on the assumptions which we are going to cover in this video. And I think that'll, once again, make the models more intuitive, make them consistent with the rest of the class and with the world around you, so that hopefully it feels more motivated and less like you are just trying to memorize random facts. As far as it relates to your personal life and your career and hopefully all of our goals to make the world a better place, really what we're going to cover today is our lessons in how to make efficient decisions, how to make the most out of our limited availability of supplies, of production, to achieve the most good, to best satisfy our wants and needs. And so I'm going to discuss how we do that and how economists assume that everyone in their models does this as best they can. So to better understand what defines an economics model, we need to start a little more generally and think about what is a model as broadly understood. What is a model in any field of science, be it a physical science, a life science, or a social science? So a model, we're going to use the word model and theory interchangeably here, just as we do in the textbook, but a model is just going to be a simplification of reality, which is going to allow us to better understand the world around us. And there are going to be two types of assumptions which we're going to use in models. These are going to be simplifying assumptions and critical assumptions. When we think about models as applied to economics, these models are going to, these simplifications of reality are going to represent agents acting in response to incentives, needs, wants, and availability. Basically, our core concepts which constitute our definition of scarcity. Now, when we say agents, who do we mean? Are we talking about James Bond, 007? Are we thinking about double agents, secret agents? No. Agents is just a general term which can refer to individuals, refer to households, refer to countries, basically whatever acting body is making a decision or interacting. The agent just refers to the decision-making entity in our model. So just remember that can refer to people, to households, to cities, to countries, really whoever's making a decision. So what I would like to do now is to better define and differentiate simplifying assumptions and critical assumptions, both in economics models and in models which you may be more familiar with. And so to do so, I would like to provide some examples. So if we think of a roadmap as being a model of the geographical world around us, as a way to better understand our surroundings, then we can think about the absence of trees on a roadmap as being a simplifying assumption. Obviously, not adding trees to a map of roadways does not change our understanding of how to get from point A to point B, how to drive from Detroit to Saginaw. However, if we thought about the actual geographical world around us, there obviously are trees, there are homes, but removing those from reality to our model does not remotely affect our core understanding about travel between those two cities. And so we can eliminate we can eliminate a feature of reality when we create our model, and if it doesn't affect our understanding of reality, then that is a simplifying assumption. We assume that trees don't exist. When we think about economic models, we will often see that consumers are faced with a choice between only two goods. We will see this in a couple sets of videos, or a couple of videos from now, where we think about a consumer making a choice between bus tickets and hamburgers or hot dogs. Obviously, a consumer, an individual who is buying goods and services, does not only spend their income, does not only spend their money on bus tickets and hamburgers. You need housing, you need entertainment, you need something to drink as well, right? But because eliminating those other goods, those other commodities which they can buy from the model doesn't impact the lessons which we can take away from the model, doesn't impact what the model would suggest for efficient behavior. And to get into why it doesn't affect that, you'll need to take higher level classes, specifically intermediate microeconomics. We can think of it as a simplifying assumption. Now, critical assumptions are different. If we eliminate some information from reality when we create our model, and it does impact what suggestions, what conclusions we can draw from the model, then that is a critical assumption. And so at the very least, individuals in economics models are assumed to be rational. And if we change that assumption that individuals are rational, then the conclusions of our models are going to be very different. And there are different sets of critical assumptions depending on what model we are considering. We will see that when we consider supply and demand. But every economics model is going to at least involve some degree of rationality. And economists want their model individuals to think like we say they are supposed to think. And that's going to better help us understand the predictions of these models. And we want, as economists, we want you all to think that way too, because that is going to allow you to make the most efficient decisions. And so over the next couple sets of slides in this video, we'll discuss the process about how you can think rationally, which is also the same way that economists expect individuals in their models to think. So what does rational really mean? Well, if we go back to our definition of scarcity, we realize that individuals or economic agents have wants and needs, but they're unable to satisfy all of those wants or needs. So they need to act to satisfy as many of them as possible. If you are just leaving your wants and needs unfulfilled, despite the availability to satisfy those wants and needs, then you're acting irrationally. That's all we're basically trying to describe. And so to better think about the components of this assumption of rational behavior, I'm going to draw on the work of two economists at the University of Michigan, being Justin Wolfers and Betsy Stevenson. And in their new textbook, which is a great resource, but also a little bit more expensive and extensive than I wanted to require for this principles class, they describe 4 basic principles of economic behavior, and we are going to focus on 3 of those, which create their rational rule. And those 3 principles are going to be the cost-benefit principle, the opportunity cost principle, and the marginal principle. And when we add them all together, we create a set of behavior in which we can think of individuals acting rationally. And so over the next set of slides, I want to discuss each of these sets of principles before realizing what they imply when we combine them. So the first principle, the cost-benefit principle, I think is the most obvious, the most intuitive, and should come the easiest for you to understand. So this principle states that economic agents, be they households, individuals, or local towns or companies, only make decisions which are expected to have a greater benefit than cost, right? Why would anybody make a decision which they think is going to harm them? They may make a decision where the costs and benefits differ from what they expect and end up being harmful, but when they make the decision, they expect the benefits to be greater than the costs, and we think of that as being rational. Now, there are a couple points that I would like to make about this principle, which may be less obvious. The first is that interactions between agents following this principle are not zero-sum, meaning that it's not always a win-lose. Economic interactions are often win-win, that we create value by engaging with each other in economic interactions. Let's say that you buy a new laptop. You are only going to buy that laptop if your willingness to pay for that laptop, representing the benefit that you receive from buying the laptop, is greater than the price which you pay for the laptop. And so that defines our cost-benefit principle. You expect the benefit to be greater than the cost. However, no matter how good of a deal you think you are getting on that laptop, or if you're buying a new car and negotiating with the car salesperson, then that car salesperson is only going to sell you the car if they expect the benefits of selling the car to be greater than the costs of selling the car. And so if you are engaging in that market exchange of buying and selling a car, buying and selling a laptop, both parties are going to benefit from that trade. The car dealer is going to make a profit, and you are going to receive the benefit of the new car, which is greater than the price which you are paying. And so these are win-win situations. Now, if we add up the benefit which you receive from buying the car or the laptop, and that benefit being the difference between how much you are willing to pay for it and how much you actually did pay for it, and the benefit which the dealer receives or the laptop salesperson receives for selling the laptop, we add those two together, we get the total surplus or the economic surplus, and that is what defines the value which we have created through that interaction. Now, the point that I think is maybe the least intuitive, the one that I would like to go into a little more detail to explain, is that making decisions according to the cost-benefit rule does not mean that you are necessarily acting selfishly, greedy, or materialistic. All it means is that you are acting in accordance with maximizing your objective function, and whatever you want to put in that objective function, whatever is important to you, is what you are acting rationally to maximize. If what matters to you is charity and philanthropy, then it is rational for you to maximize the warm fuzzies that you get from donating to a food bank. It is rational for you to maximize the sense of good and purpose that you get from contributing to the collection jar at church, to volunteering in your community, even though if we would think purely materialistically, that wouldn't necessarily make sense. Similarly, this is how we can think about it being rational for people of lower economic status to vote for a Republican candidate which is going to be less materialistically beneficial to their lives. And that would be the case because if they view the power and the tribal benefit of exerting their will, their political will over somebody else as counting towards their objective function, then it doesn't matter that they are materially worse off because they are maximizing their happiness or utility.